Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. Welcome to the Claremont Main Road Masjid Annual General Meeting on this Sunday, the 4th of July, 2021. To kick off proceedings, I'm going to ask Imam Rashid Omar to say an opening dua to kick off our meeting this morning.
الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. ربنا يسر ولا تعسر، ربنا تمم بالخير، اللهم افتح لنا بالخير واختم لنا بالخير، واجعل عواقب أمورنا بالخير، بيدك الخير والعافية، إنك على كل شيء قدير. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وأدخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار يا رب العالمين. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم، وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون، وسلام على المرسلين، والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Shukran, Imam Rashid, and I welcome you all to the annual general meeting, the second AGM in a pandemic era, hopefully our last one with a virtual format. And to be honest, it doesn't get any easier nor less weird, despite it being the second iteration of a virtual AGM. Further, in my mind, there's a lot of nostalgia for our AGMs of the past, moving into the Sports Science Institute lecture theatre, having been generously facilitated by Butajoa's connections with that institute, seeing the faces in that tiered theatre, knowing that at the back is sitting Jihad Omar, in the middle is Dr. Manjra, to the right-hand corner is Mr. Iso, and somewhere in the front is Uncle Baka Jakut, and usually with an intervention with his arm raised at some point. So despite the nostalgia, we move ahead. I know we're zooming in from Salt River to Surrey Estate, from Vanguard Estate to Fairways, from Rondebosch to Retreat. And as I'm sure you're well aware, this virtual format means the same rules that we have now hopefully become accustomed to. Please keep yourselves on mute if you're not speaking. Please raise your hand with the digital raised hand function as part of the Zoom technology. We ask you to comment and provide feedback through the chat box, and really to ask you to continue to contribute in the ways that you normally would in an in-person session, in light of the fact that usually with these virtual sessions, it may become more of a one-directional communication channel, as opposed to the kind of feedback and discursive meetings that we really find productive, as well as ensures that there's general contributions from the floor. As you know, this session is recorded. You can see that in the left-hand corner of your Zoom profile. We have the standard agenda, but acknowledging the fact that we have time limitations, again, there will be no special guest speaker today. And much like last year, we'll continue with a special general meeting once we've concluded the standard agenda. That special general meeting will cover 2 or 3 points of discussion, and we really hope to gather your input in that session. We will start with the tabling of the 2020 report, but I think it would be remiss if we do not acknowledge that in the last year, between our last AGM and today, we've bid farewell, we've lost, and we've grieved many members of the Claremont Main Road Masjid, friends of the Masjid, as well as treasures within our community. So I'm going to ask you to pause for 30 seconds to reflect on those members, friends, loved ones, treasures of our community that have been lost over the last year, and to reflect on their lives and their legacies, and to also make a silent prayer in acknowledgement of those that we've bid farewell in this period. At the conclusion of this 30-second period, I'm going to ask Imam Rashid to say a short dua. We'll start that 30 seconds now. Shukran, Imam Rashid.
الفاتحة. نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسول الكريم. We thank and praise Allah and bestow salutations and peace upon our noble messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma ighfir lahum warhamhum wasakkinhum fil jannah. O Allah, we ask you to pardon and to forgive them. O Allah, we ask you to have mercy on their souls. And O Allah, we ask you to grant them a high status in Al-Jannah. Allahumma aftah abwab as-sama li arwahihim. O Allah, we ask you to open the doors of your mercy to receive their souls. Ya ayyatuha an-nafs al-mutma'innah, irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyah, fadkhuli fi ibadi, wadkhuli jannati. O those souls who have departed, may your Lord receive you with his words of welcome. Enter among my devotees, enter my paradise. Allahumma la tahrimna ajrahum wa la taftinna ba'dahum waghfir lana wa lahum wa lil muslimina ajma'in. Allahumma aghfir li hayyina wa mayyitina wa shahidina wa ghaibina wa saghirina wa kabirina wa dhakarina wa unthana. Allahumma man ahyaytahu minna فأحيه على الإسلام ومن توفيته منا فتوفوا على الإيمان برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم لا تحرمنا أجرهم ولا تفتنا بعدهم واغفر لنا ولهم وللمسلمين أجمعين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Shukran, Imam. We will conclude today's meeting with a 4-minute video tribute to all the deceased, and we'll ask Imam Shahid to conclude that with a dua as well. We move to our next item on the agenda, which is the minutes of the AGM held on the 13th of September 2020. And I'll ask for your comment and feedback. That those minutes were circulated, and we will need a proposer to accept and a seconder before we can adopt those minutes. I'm also going to encourage you to propose or second from outside of our board member leadership group. And that will obviously be a good indication of our, as I mentioned at the outset, the contributions from the general membership of the CMRM. Are there any comments? If so, either via the chat box or if you'd like to raise your hand and issue that directly. Okay, no comments. Can we get a proposer for adopting those minutes? You can do that via the chat box. Right. Anybody from the leadership cluster?
I saw a hand up, Saleh, but I couldn't see who it was.
Okay.
Somebody had a thumbs up.
Okay, perfect. From Susanna, we have in the chat box to propose. She's the first proposer, and we have a seconder, which is Lutfi. And so I move to adopt those minutes from the 13th of September, 2020. Shukran, everybody. Next, we head to any matters arising from the minutes not elsewhere on the agenda. And to be clear, there's nothing at this moment to be raised. And so I'd like to move from that point to the next point on the agenda, which is tabling the 2020 report. And those are the reports from the board. That will include my report, Imam Rashid's report, our interfaith report by Rashid Khalant, Jamia with the other reports, and then contributions from the floor in terms of feedback or comment, and then we'll move to accept those reports. So if I can begin with the chairperson's report. I mean, I think at the outset I concluded, at the outset today, I mentioned that we'd hoped that last year's virtual format would be the last of the virtual platform, and that over the following period, we'd have a return to the masjid, to its regular programming in person, and that there would be some sense of a return to a new normal. So as I said earlier, it's with some nostalgia that we sit today with this continuing new normal. And I just like to reflect in this report that prior to 2020, the Board of Governors would have conducted all its meetings in person, usually on the floor space of the masjid, snacks provided by the members in the meeting. And now over this last year, it's been a year of the screen, as it has been for most of us, whether it's the cell phone, the tablet, the laptop, the personal computer. And the Board of Governors has pivoted pretty smartly to this new reality. I mean, with the odd, please unmute yourself, but generally pretty smooth and smartly. But we still have not been to the masjid. And for most of us, we've not seen the inside of the masjid over the last year. For some who have visited for administrative duties or to film some of the online presentations, they have had rather limited and obviously a devitalized experience of the masjid compared to the pre-pandemic experiences. So, you know, with the closure of the masjid, it hasn't stopped certain upgrades, and for that, the closure has, in a sense, served as a period of renewal for the physical space, for upgrades, including the painting of the exterior to the replacement of the carpet in the interior space to the complete renewal of the wudu and bathroom area and other smaller refurbishments, which will continue as we begin to close out and round out the long list of smaller but sometimes longer to complete items on our list.
Assalamu alaikum.
The
Hello?
the reality is that the masjid is devitalized, as I mentioned earlier, from the people that really give it its life, and that was not an easy decision, and continues to be a traumatic decision process to keep the masjid closed for this length of time. We've issued a series of corona advisories with respect to the decision to keep the masjid closed, or at least the evaluation of the decision to keep the masjid closed, or the thinking that would contribute to opening the masjid. That has not been done alone by the Board of Governors. It's been a consultation with infectious disease specialists as well as public health experts, and also consistent then within the regulations of the South African government with respect to gathering. So to remain closed, even at this stage, is difficult and is a decision that we revisit every few weeks. But we continue to live with the uncertainty of the pandemic, and so that decision to remain closed is the status quo for now. However, the activities of the masjid have continued. So whilst the space has been devitalized, we've continued to work and serve in the community. There's been innovation, and the pivot has been remarkable, and certain activities have actually flourished during this period. And I'll leave that to the separate reports from the various board members to give you a sense of what has occurred in this period. But we've had a tribute to those people we've lost in this period. And I'd like to, at this point in my report, also acknowledge and pay tribute to the leadership group that have sustained the masjid, juggling their own vulnerabilities during the pandemic, whether it is existing medical conditions to actually themselves becoming infected with the coronavirus, but have continued to serve and to serve with care and compassion out of duty, but also out of love for the masjid and the broader community. So, I mean, I had originally, from a personal note, been on the periphery out in London and have returned, but in this period, the activities have been guided and been led by the rest of the Board of Governors, remarkably so by Jamia Khalant, the Imamat, and Buddha Ahmad Peters. And I thank them at this point for the incredible work and sustained work during a very, very challenging period for everybody in their personal lives, but also in the context of loss and uncertainty. So shukran to them. And at this point, I hand over to Imam Rashid for the Imam's report.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Just a very important point is that despite the masjid having remained closed, our resident muazzin, Noor Khalant, has continued to make the adhan for every waqt inside of the masjid. And our resident Imam, Hafiz Muhammad Lubwama, has been leading the 5 daily salawat in the masjid. And we also have a caretaker, so the 3 of them have continued to observe the salah inside of the masjid. Now, we also moved our khutbas, and we call them Friday Nasihas, online. It was live streamed via the Masjid YouTube channel and the Facebook Live channel. And this has enabled us, because it's an online format, to invite a number of national and international speakers who would normally not have been able to attend the masjid. These are guest speakers, and this online format has also allowed us to have a record percentage of 33% female speakers for our weekly Friday lectures. We have also developed a number of resources, du'as, and other materials which are also now available online on a permanent basis. Then we were also able to convene, I would say, a relatively successful and well-attended educational webinar on why Eid al-Adha with Makkah. And of course, we produced a moving tribute to our frontline workers. We also had the Mawlud al-Nabi, which was celebrated online successfully. And we had one or two Zoom dhikrs. We also published a number of our Friday nasihas, as in the past, both written as well as in Al-Qalam, and a couple of them appeared in the newspapers. I want to conclude then, because I don't want to take a lot of time. We do have the report available to everyone, by thanking particularly Ridwan Wahid, Abdullah Mirza, and others who helped us with the technology. Every Friday, having the Friday Nasiha, it's been a lot of work behind the scenes. So shukran to Ridwan and all of those who helped. And in conclusion, I once again, myself and Imam Shahid, would like to sincerely thank the Board of Governors under the leadership of Dr. Saleh Solomons and Jamia Khalant for their guidance, their support under these very trying conditions. And as always, we welcome any constructive feedback on how we could improve and better fulfill our imamat responsibilities. Shukran, Saleh.
Shukran, Imam. I call on Rashid Khalant for his report on the interfaith work that the masjid has done over this period.
Assalamu alaikum. I hope everybody can hear me. Shukran and welcome. The interfaith activities of the mosque last year wasn't obviously as spirited as previously because of the conditions. And largely the interfaith group has been confined to the WhatsApp, the interfaith WhatsApp group, where most of the activities and community has coalesced during the pandemic. There's currently just over 80 members on this group, and it's called the Anti-Crime Interfaith Dialogue Group, which follows on from the very purpose of the origin of the Cape Flats Interfaith Initiative in 2019, which was to respond to the war on the Cape Flats. It's mainly currently Christian and Muslim representatives, with a few other faith representation from like Ahmadi, Buddhist, and non-traditional faiths. And at the moment, there are no Hindu or Jewish representatives in this group. So last year, I mean, at the beginning of the year, the group suffered a very sad setback with the passing of Mr. Wilfred Alcock, who was the brainchild behind the Cape Flats Interfaith Initiative. So that was quite a blow to the group. Nevertheless, we still the group has still managed to maintain its community and momentum in a way through the WhatsApp groups and also several other activities. In March, we had the last face-to-face dialogue in Delft. And then Another setback as well, another sad, tragic setback, was when the deputy president of SAUSA, which was the organization that was housing the interfaith group, the Cape Place Interfaith Group, the deputy president, Pastor Daniel Swartz, he succumbed to COVID in August. So that was a double setback also for the group last year. There were several online meetings, what we call dialogues, that were held from April onwards. And these were, it was just general meetings for the sake of, just keeping up community, keeping up spirits. At that time, it was keeping up spirits and just making whatever connections we can make at whatever time with people. And it was general, just talking discussions. It wasn't like themes, that we had. And those were very uplifting at times as well. By September, there were, when we came out of our first hard lockdown, there were several outside interfaith prayer meetings in communities that were still affected by gang violence, and these happened in Q Town, Hanover Park, and in Manenberg. And then towards the end of the year, in our second wave, a very innovative activity was the interfaith prayer sessions outside major hospitals. It started out as a dhikr that was spearheaded by Sheikh Salih Isaacs. But because he's part of the interfaith group, it became also an interfaith prayer meeting that was being held outside the hospitals. And this initiative was very well received generally by the public. So it meant a lot for people. Then other activities outside the Cape Flats Interfaith group was CMRM's participation in the People Against Apartheid and Fascism protest march to the Indian consulate, and that was to present a memorandum calling on the Indian government to revoke apparently discriminatory pieces of legislation that it was intended to pass. Then also in January, at the beginning of the year, Imam Shahid. So Imam Shahid and Imam Rashid are really the drivers in the interfaith movement, with me lending some support at times as well. Imam Shahid represented CMRM at the 7th Cape Flats Interfaith Dialogue, and the 8th one was held the following month, was held in February the following month in Delft, and that was of the last face-to-face dialogue meetings. Then we also participated in the memorial service for Mr. Wilfred Alcock following his death, and that was an interfaith service as well. In February, the Reverend Berry Bear, who is the chairperson of the Cape Flats Interfaith Initiative, she delivered the pre-khutbah talk at the mosque in commemoration of World Interfaith Harmony Week. And then in July, CMRM was one of the few institutions issuing a statement lamenting the reconversion of the Hagia Sophia into a masjid by the Turkish president in Istanbul. In September, Father Michael Lapsley, an old friend of CMRM, delivered an online Friday Nasiha on the campaign to fight COVID-19 corruption. And then in December, CMRM partnered with the Institute for the Healing of Memories and the Goedgedacht Interfaith Chapel in hosting an interfaith discussion on wounded humanity and planet, Christian witness and reconciliation in a multi-religious world. On Christmas last year, which was on a Friday, Dr. Ali Busak delivered an online Friday Nasiha Christmas message that was recorded at the masjid. And then also following a long-standing tradition, the mosque issued a special Christmas message of hope and recommitting ourselves to joining our Christian compatriots and other allies in the interfaith movement to rebuild and reshape our lives with a new, and our lives and our country with a new normal of greater compassion, socioeconomic justice, and accountability in 2021. Shukran. So that sums up our interfaith
Shukran,
activities.
Rashid, for the comprehensive report and for your leadership. Moving on quickly to Jamia and other reports.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I'm going to just do summaries of the other reports we had. As you can imagine, I think everybody's mentioned this already. The closure of the masjid and the protocols involved with protecting ourselves and others from the coronavirus had a huge impact on our jihad against poverty activities. Initially, we were very cautious about what we could do financially, but alhamdulillah, we did through the generosity of our congregants. We got sufficient donations for us to meet most of our jihad against poverty commitments this year. Which included contributing to continued feeds at Beitul Aman, at Blikkiesdorp, and also Mannenberg Soup Kitchen. And our thanks there to Buta Ahmad for coordinating the Mannenberg feeds, and also Sharifa Weideman, the Masjid's administrator, for coordinating the Blikkiesdorp feeds. One of our biggest projects is the farm community projects in Leeuwenkuil. And sadly, last year, we actually only went once, which was the end of the year. Traditionally, we have a day of solidarity, of fun and entertainment. Last year, we did it very differently. We took the food parcels, we had toiletry packs, we had party packs. And then we went on a day's drive to 7 farms, individual farms. We had representatives of the farmers meet us there to accept the parcels and take responsibility for the distribution. It was a very different way of doing things, but also a wonderful opportunity for us to see many of the farm workers in their places on the different farms. So it was an inspiring journey actually, but also a very tiring journey. One of the new communities that we supported last year, in addition to all of the others we have traditionally supported, was the Uniform Delft Action Network. And through the prompting of a CMRM congregant, we also contributed to ongoing feeding schemes in the Delft community. With respect to our youth empowerment, of course, again, the premier kind of platform for our youth are our Tarawih dhikrs, which we didn't have last year. So we compensated a little bit by inviting some of our youth to do some recitations, which we put together with our Friday Nasikhas. So that was very nice. We had a few of them reciting at the beginning or the end of some of the Friday Nasikhas, which you can view on YouTube. And then also invitation to youth speakers. And we had 2 very inspiring youth speakers, both senior students, Mazin Jepi and Farah Javits, amongst others. And really we encourage other youth to put up their hands, to let us know what they're doing that's interesting, what they'd like to share with us. We will welcome those opportunities to give you a platform to share your thoughts. I think it's very important for us to continue to platform youth voices, and you'll see from the topics range in terms of what youth have to share with us. Then finally, our gender justice for the first time in many, many years, because once again, because of the closure, it was the first time in many years that we had no placard demonstrations outside or silent vigils to raise awareness about the scourge of gender-based violence, which of course hasn't gone away. In fact, was somewhat exacerbated during lockdown. But we did harness once again our Friday Nasiha platforms for some inspiring talks, particularly by Dr. Mariam Khan on intimate partner violence, and then also Siam Samai on a victim-centered approach to sexual violence. But you'll see that we had a range of speakers, female speakers, and Imam said earlier, a record number this year. On a range of topics, and that was wonderful, including Neelam Feeder, who spoke on the commemoration of International Children's Day, and of course last year we missed out on our traditional Children's Day activities, which we've had pre-Ramadan and in Ramadan. And her talk once again was a very inspiring talk, but also kind of scary in terms of talking about the risks of child exploitation and abuse that exists out there, including online. And then our environmental justice, I think I want to highlight here the need for more people to get involved and assist us with this particular dimension of the masjid. We had two very good speakers, Dr. Alia Davids, who spoke on a topic not many of us knew anything about, the intersection between human, animal, and environmental health. And then also Nazir Sunday, commemorating World Food Day. And again, you know, there's more that we can do. Imam Rashid also participated in a panel discussion around nuclear energy. So we will welcome any people, you know, who have the interest, who have the passion, who have the expertise to assist us to do more around environmental justice, both practically and also just building awareness around that. Shukran, Saleh. I think that concludes my reports.
Shukran, Jamia. At this point, considering the few reports, I'd like to open up to our members for discussion, feedback, or comment. If you'd like to do that via the chat box, please do so. Otherwise, if you could raise your hand, and we'll get to offer that directly verbally. Are there any comments? Okay, I'm just running through our participants. No comments yet. Okay, I'd like to add that in my report, I noted the refurbishments of the exterior as well as the interior space of the masjid. This isn't achievable without generous contributions from a variety of donors, and I'd like to acknowledge our donors for continuing to look after the masjid, despite the masjid not being in our daily or weekly lives. And obviously the masjid being prepared for our grand return. In the UK, they talk about the opening up day as being Freedom Day. I think we have our own Freedom Day, but the masjid is definitely in a condition to welcome us all in once we return to our new normal services in hopefully the next few months. So shukran again, and immense gratitude to our donors. Are there any other comments? Jamia?
No, I've just put it in the chat. I just wanted to add the thanks that you then added.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to move to accept those reports. If I could get a proposer and seconder from the membership via the chat box would be ideal, because then we can see everybody. I see Butajoa's hand going up as a proposer, and And seconded from Mr. Kaji. Perfect. I move and accept on behalf of the board and the membership those reports. Shukran, everybody. We move to our sixth item on the agenda, which is the finance report, and I call on our treasurer, Auntie Wasila Akhadin, to present her slides on those annual financial statements. Auntie Wasila.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. A summary of our financial statements are in the 2020 annual report that was sent out electronically. Full reports are available on request. From the start of lockdown in March 2020, we were very concerned about the financial impact of the closure of the masjid and loss of regular Jummah collections. We thus took a cautious stance, and from April 2020, we developed a COVID-19 revised budget that enabled us to carefully monitor our expenditure against a reduced anticipated income month by month. We agreed to prioritize the running cost of the masjid, including salaries of staff and imamat, and proceed more cautiously with jihad against poverty expenditure. We are deeply humbled by the outpouring of generosity from our congregation that not only enable us to maintain the running cost of the masjid, but also enable us to meet most of our budgeted commitment to needy communities as part of our jihad against poverty program. Shukran to all who donated so generously. The 2020 annual financial statements were prepared by myself and reviewed by A.B. Drummond from A.B. Drummond and Associates Professional Accountants. We thank Mr. Drummond for his report. My thanks also to Sharifa Weideman, our Masjid administrator, for the work she does keeping track of daily and monthly accounts throughout the year. A big thank you to Jamia for preparing my presentation. The statement of financial position shows that the total assets of the masjid at the end of 2020 was 1,475,684. The Kagiso investments reflect only the staff gratuity allocation in Kagiso funds, so it is not a real asset but is still on our accounts. In 2020, we had a surplus of 212,085 Rand. The accumulated reserves at the end of December 2020 was 1,475,684, which was carried forward into 2021. Actual income in 2020 was less than budget and less than 2019. This was not surprising because of the closure of the masjid. What was encouraging is that membership income in 2020 was just over 302,000 compared to just 258,000 in 2019. This can be seen in the detailed income statement of the 2020 annual report. Loss of Jummah and Eid collections were compensated by much higher Sadaqah income through EFTs. Expenses was also much less than budget and less than 2019. Due to the masjid closure, expenses were obviously much lower for things like ablution paper, printing, and cleaning products. Estimated cost and services covered by donors. These are part of the running cost of the masjid for which we do not actually pay. The costs are either borne by the donor or paid directly to the supplier by a specific donor. Shukran. Are there any questions?
Shukran, Rashida. Do we have any comments or feedback from our members? Scrolling through the tiles, I don't see any hands up. Okay, I mean, I think there's two things that are really quite striking. The first thing is that we've managed to increase our paid membership fee. We've increased our fees collected from members, or alternately, we've increased our number of members over this period, and it may reflect one or two things. The first thing is that far more people are engaged with the Masjid programs, having shifted to the online formats, and therefore having, access to these materials, and so the value of the services are even more appreciated by members, sufficient enough for people to pay the membership fees. The second bit is there's clearly been a concern from the broader membership about the sustainability of the masjid in an era where it's not obvious that we can get the contributions on a Friday or make appeals for special projects through the mimbar on whenever we have a service. So, the fact that the sadaqah income is also increased substantially over this period is really reassuring, and it may serve as a point that we can build on when we return to normal in-person activities. So there are some lessons. We've perhaps decried the kind of falling membership or falling contributions, and hopefully with this time away from the masjid, we've also now been able to see some of the added value in different formats. But I'm happy for any other comments related to the presentation from Aunty Washila. I mean, there was a considerable concern and anxiety, especially in the first 6 months of the pandemic, as to how the masjid would survive, and that reflected in the urgency of the work done by Aunty Washila and others in trying to problem solve, which was quite a challenging thing considering all the uncertainties. And so I really thank Aunty Washila for this, for her contributions, especially in this period, and obviously to all the supporting actors that have helped to steer the masjid's finances in this period. So with that, and with no other interventions from the floor, I would like to move to accept the 2020 finance report, and I'd like some non-board members to perhaps indicate as a proposer and a seconder.
Khadija Basir's hand is up. I'm not sure if she's proposing or she has a question.
Yeah, sorry, Saleh and Jamia, I just wanted to raise, so first is to say thank you to Aunty Wasila for a great job as always. Just following on from your observations, Saleh, in terms of post the pandemic or during the pandemic now and the financial sustainability of the mosque, is there any pivoting in terms of our strategy, and maybe linking also a little bit with Jamia's report on jihad against poverty? I know in the initial phases we spoke about potentially using some of the money to help people who had transitory needs, etc. And I think we concluded that, within the maybe, I think it was around the people who wanted to maybe needed to meet things like rent and school fees and that sort of thing. Did we change some of that strategy in terms of how we apportion the funds? And I apologize if it was covered in the financial report. I haven't actually read it in detail, and I've just listened to Aunty Wasila's presentation.
To my knowledge, we haven't changed the approach. I mean, and I think you're speaking specifically to the relief fund.
Yes, yes, I am.
There hasn't been a change, and we do have the fund, and
okay.
The disbursements of from that will continue based on, I guess, case by case basis, either direct appeal or appeal through others. Jamia?
I've just put in the chat, Khadija. We will raise this in the special general meeting when Wasila will present the budget for 2021.
Okay. Okay.
So it wasn't part of the 2020. I mean, the report she's done now.
Okay.
So it will
Okay.
come up in the next section of our meeting.
So when we talk about financial sustainability, we're saying within the context of our normal disbursements that we have to make and the Jihad Against Poverty program, we were able to meet all of those requirements, but there wasn't a step up in terms of additional COVID relief that was catered for over this financial year.
Correct. So we
we ring-fenced the relief
Okay.
fund. That's what you
Okay.
asked for. We totally ring-fenced the relief fund. There was some disbursement, as you can see. I think the disbursement, in fact, is reflected in was reflected in last year's finances. And in the budget, you will see the balance that's still available for 2021.
But it was completely separated.
Completely separated, and alhamdulillah, that was really what is amazing about the 2020 report. That in addition to that ring fencing, we still met all of our immediate obligations in addition to the other Jihad Against Poverty.
That is amazing. It is amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Salih.
Thanks, Khadija. Okay. Going back to the move to accept the report, can we get a proposer? And can I see a hand or a note in the chat box? Is there a hand? I can't see any. Can I take your hand, Khadija?
Yeah, it's a new hand.
Yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. There's the proposer and the seconder. We need a seconder. Okay, Lutfi has seconded. Perfect. Shukran, everybody. We move to accept and adopt the 2020 finance report. To the second part of the finance reporting is really our appointment of the auditor for 2021-2022. The Board of Governors is satisfied with our independent accounting professional, Mr. Basir Dramat, and we recommend that he's appointed to continue to review and certify our finances for the period 2021-2022. Can I ask for a proposer and a seconder on that? Great, we have a proposer from Mr. Kaji and a seconder. Let me just check the chat box. Is that Uncle Ridwan who's seconded for the first point or the second point? I'm not sure. Okay, we need a seconder. Anybody? And Khadija. Shukran, Khadija. Right. Our next item on the agenda is the annual membership contribution rates 2021. Jamia.
Shukran, Salih. I'm just going to go to share my screen again. I think given the current context that we're in, I think that we're not going to propose an increase in membership for now. I mean, we haven't actually increased our membership for a very long time. Sorry, that was the wrong screen. We haven't increased that membership for a very long time. So I'm wanting to propose that we keep it the same. And instead, we have to though consider at some point when we will increase our membership. But for now, what I would like to do in sharing my screen today is just to alert people, for those people who are in this meeting, particularly who've not actually yet signed up as a member to the masjid, we now have a Google form, and I can put the link to the Google, I will put the link to the Google form in the chat later. But just to indicate that since posting it, we have had at least 17 people that have completed the online Google form. The form asks not only for your details to be added to our mailing list or our WhatsApp broadcast list, but also asks you to make a pledge to the masjid. And if anything, 2020 and 2021 has demonstrated how critical that membership commitment is to the sustainability of the masjid. And so we say once again, thank you to those who have continued to meet that commitment, and really encourage those who have not yet done so to do so. Just one proviso, please, that if you do make this pledge and you do make this payment, to please put your name to it, because we do still have on our books a few anonymous donations that do get made, but they don't get put against the name, and so you don't get added to our database that indicates that you're a member that's paying a pledge. So just to alert you to this, if you can't get into the link, you can email me directly, you can contact the masjid to get the link to complete this form. I'll pause the Imam Rashid's hand is up.
Yeah. Imam Rashid?
Yes, thank you, Jamia, for that. I would just like to encourage all of us today to try to recruit people to become members of the masjid. This is absolutely critical. And the way to start is, as Jihad will know here, on a monthly basis, I harass my own children, right? And ask them, are you paying your masjid fees? Are you paying your zakat? Are you becoming member? And so they get very angry with me, but I think this is very, very important. My brother currently serves on the, has just been co-opted onto the board of the Tennyson Street Masjid, right, in Salt River here, and they don't have membership. And so it's a case of many masajid. They don't have structures. They can't have AGMs because there's no membership, right? And in the conditions in which we live, especially now, it's not easy to get people to become members of the masjid. People have this attitude that I can attend any masjid. Of course you can attend any masjid, but you can also belong to more than one masjid. You don't need to only belong to the Claremont Masjid. Make a contribution, not only financially, but also in terms of the administration of the masjid, attending the meetings, and otherwise you have a small group controlling the masjid because people are not concerned. But again, I would like to appeal to you to start with your families. I have lots of people coming to me for all kinds of pastoral responsibilities. Like, for example, they want to have a nikah. Then I will tell them, that you're not a member of the masjid. I'll perform the nikah, but please, help me as well to strengthen the masjid so that I can help more people, in performing. But they just, we perform the nikah and then you don't see them anymore. So I know it's a challenging task, but please, if we can, each one of us, we are now 38 people. If each one of us recruits one person in the next year, I think that would be really remarkable. Thank you for your patience with me. I'm known as the yellow form, but alhamdulillah, if I die and you put on my grave yellow form, I think that I would have done an excellent job, because that's so critical to the functioning of masajid. Shukran for your patience with me.
Shukran, Imam. Jamia?
Shukran, Imam. I think Jihad's picked up that we've now introduced a new bid'ah with the Google form, but inshallah this is a beneficial bid'ah, and we hope that people respond to it positively. Then the second point I wanted to highlight again is the Masjid Huliha platform, which used to be the Mobikal platform. And this was has been a free platform. And I want to highlight the platform because people have to be signed into the platform in order, one, to receive emails that we send via this platform, and also to access the resources. And people who have not signed in don't actually know what is there. They Mobicar migrated to this Huliha platform, and from this month onwards, it's now a paid platform at 99 Rand per month, which is still not an excessive amount. But what the platform allows, and this is just what I want to show very briefly, I've taken just a screenshot, for example, of the range of folders that we currently have on this platform. These have been put there by us, organized in very particular ways. You'll see all of the last AGM, annual reports from 2011, for example, are there. They're all accessible in the one folder, and folders are clearly named. In addition to the collection of khutbahs that we have, I've also created, for example, individualized folders. So if you want to see all of the khutbahs delivered at CMRM by Dr. Aslam Fatah, then you can click on his folder and you can get a range of his talks. If you're looking only for resources or khutbahs related to gender-based violence, there's a folder on that, etc. So the second screenshot there, I've just clicked on one of the folders, which is the Eid al-Fitr khutbahs, and there you'll see all of the collection of Eid al-Fitr khutbahs in PDF form, which is available for you to download. So Mobica or Huliha has served as an archival platform for us. It has many other features, including being able to do surveys and polls, which we actually used in 2019 to get feedback on our sexual harassment policy. It has a crowdfunding feature, which we used for jihad against poverty collections also in 2019. Unfortunately, it's not been that successful. Somehow, perhaps the people who are part of the Masjid membership are not into the whole online, I don't know, tech savvy, whatever. So that's not been that successful. But I do want to encourage you to join the site. Once you join the site, given the new POPI Act, etc., you basically consent to receive the emails, notices from the masjid, which goes out via the Huliha site, and you then have access to all the folders. There are also some audio folders there. Another feature which we have not yet exploited and used very well is the membership. Sorry, I've just got somebody visiting here. Is the membership database, and that's also just because we don't have sufficient of our own members who've logged on. But it allows you to mark who are your members on your database, etc., etc. So that's all for me from on this point, Salih. Shukran, and I've noted the useful comments also from Khadija in the chat on our membership. Shukran, Khadija. We'll take all of those on board.
May I just quickly respond to Khadija's comments? But I see Imam Rashid has his hand up. So before I do that, maybe Imam. Oh, okay. Sorry, I'll move on to my points. So I think, Khadija, what you may be referring to or hinting at is there some thinking around framing the fees around the principle of affordability to ensure that the fees remain inclusionary. So in other words, that there's some kind of fee policy and we then define that going forward. So, I mean, do you want it as sort of refined in that way, or are you suggesting that we continue to revisit this year on year?
Yeah, no, I think my observation, Salih, was just around, and I know like Jamia, started the preamble with saying we haven't increased our fees for a very long time. And I think my observation was just that in itself doesn't need to be, we don't need to increase the fees for the sake of increasing the fees. We've just got to be very clear on what are we trying to achieve with our membership, because my understanding is that the membership fee itself is a fairly notional amount, and the idea of having a membership is to promote the engagement and involvement of people rather than necessarily as a primary fundraising mechanism. So if we are changing our strategy in terms of saying, actually what we want is and I also understand that obviously when you reach a certain critical mass, then maybe you can change to being less reliant on certain key people that, you know, are giving large donations or whatever. And we want to make the mosque's future as sustainable as possible. And so the more people you have as part of that base, it does become somewhat of a financial kind of strategy. But I don't think we are at that stage. And so what you want to do is you want to probably cast your net as wide as possible, have as many people. And I mean, I know, Jamia, you've always historically, you've said, okay, we're not talking about like doubling the fee or whatever. But if you think about a family and that sort of thing, it does, you know, it starts to get quite a bit. And I don't think we want to impose any financial hurdle at people or on people for having to be part of the mosque base. So it was more an observation of, I don't think necessarily it's a disappointment that it's a bad thing that we haven't increased it, and I don't think that it's compromised our financial sustainability in any way. We just need to be quite clear on what are we trying to achieve with the level that we charge.
Yeah, correct, and I agree with you. And I think for as long as I know, the dimensions to our fee membership has been not revenue generation, and rather about the obligation to make it accessible and inclusionary. And I'm happy, you know, that we can reaffirm, at least at this AGM, that the policy on fee membership is inclusionary as opposed to revenue generation. It's just a complete aside that in this period of lockdown and masjid closure, we've managed to perhaps offset some of the losses of income through membership. But I think that there's dimensions to that we've already touched on, and I won't go into that now.
Thank you, Sonia.
Right. We move to the next point on the agenda, which is the election of office bearers. As you would have noticed, there has not been, in the 2 cycles of AGMs during the pandemic, a call for either new office bearers or candidates for new office bearers to be elected at the AGM. And the Board of Governors has proposed that we suspend or postpone our election of office bearers to 2022. There are, in amongst the current constellation of board members, terms of office that are scheduled to retire in 2020 and 2021. And from within the board, at least, we've considered that in 2022, when it is most likely when we'll be able to meet face to face. Second, that we will have this period of pandemic transition out of the way. And third, that we'll probably also need to make sure that there's renewal and obviously an election of a new board of governors. So I'd like to move to accept the postponement of the election of office bearers, and maybe prior to that, just solicit from membership any comment on that proposal from the existing Board of Governors. Okay, there are no hands and there's no comment in the chat box. I don't want to steamroller this, so I'll give it a few more seconds. Is there any comment, any feedback? Okay, so then can I get a proposer and a seconder with regards to the postponement of the election of office bearers? Uncle Ridwan, do you have a hand up?
Yes, I propose that we accept it.
Shukran, Uncle Ridwan. And do we have a seconder? Butajawa, shukran. Thank you so much, everybody. That concludes the standard agenda minus the usual speaker event, and I move to close the annual general.
Jihad has hand up.
Jihad, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am not opposed. Well, it's already passed now, so I did put my comment in the chat box. I'm not opposed at all because it's quite a onerous and difficult thing to have to do. But I do myself, and I have to speak to myself here first. I do think that we need to find mechanisms or ways in which we support the current board members more, because it is quite taxing. As you mentioned right at the onset in the beginning, a number of them have been, also stricken with COVID-19, and so whilst we obviously want to follow the guidelines set down nationally and not move around too much and visit with each other, if there are people who are available to do to help and assist with whether it be deliveries to Blikkystop or whatever it may be, I do think that this is also a time where we need to assist the board members as much as we can, more so even than before, I believe, because it has been quite taxing. And I speak with personal experience of not only my dad but my father-in-law as well, and it's not an easy thing, and so we need to also acknowledge that they're doing a lot of work, and many of us are. And I speak to myself here first, are just sitting back and not doing as much as we could. So that's my only concern. We need to also maybe be a little bit more forthcoming with our assistance at this time. Shukran.
Jamia?
Shukran, Saleh, shukran Jihad for that. I mean, I do appreciate it. You are one of quite a few people who are, in fact, who are present here, who have come on board when we needed. Ridwan Wahid being one of those as well, for example. Aslam Fatah, I think, has been there. Khadija has always been around for us to consult and has chipped in when necessary. But I think that you do make a good point. But perhaps we need to think about what is that mechanism. You're saying we need mechanisms to support the board. Maybe, we're not open enough. Our doors are not open enough. I don't know. But for example, today, if he doesn't mind, Nazir Sunday has just communicated with me that he would like to become more involved, particularly in our environmental justice programs and jihad against poverty. And so we as a board need to find the mechanism in which, for example, to welcome him in, find a space for him. We've had people, for example, work very, very well with Wasila on a fundraising committee. They don't have to attend all of the board meetings, but they do work very well on the tasks and projects and so on. And I think that notion of subcommittees, which we proposed a while ago, is the way to go. It takes the load of all of, off the whole board. The board can maintain the governance responsibility, but in doing the work, subcommittees are really the way to go. And we need to think more about how it works. Wasila has worked very well in keeping her fundraising group as a functioning group, and she's the only one that reports to the board, which is great. So I think we can take it up, and Nazir, we will welcome your assistance and participation as well. So shukran for that.
Thanks, Jamia, and shukran to Mr. Sunday for volunteering in this setting. There's two comments from Ihsan. One from Ihsan, one is who's doing the additional work of the virtual services, and is there a need to make this, I guess, more of a formalized structure going forward? And then there's the affirmation from Imam Rashid about subcommittees. On the latter point, I'm totally in agreement with subcommittees. And I think in this period between this AGM and the next, the subcommittees will probably form a pipeline for possible future office bearers. So if we can think through, separate to this meeting, what the subcommittees are, and then move on that quickly. The second thing, to Ihsan's point, is the virtual services have really, honestly, the work's been done between Jamia, Imam Rashid, Uncle Ridwan, and others. I apologize for missing out other important names there. And that is a bunch of work happening every week. So I'm eager for that work to be shared, and definitely to ensure that there's some continuity when there is an eventual turnover of people, either on the committee or moving on to other interests and activities. So that I think is an essential subcommittee, Jamia, and we can talk about that in our next board meeting. I think we've probably not exhausted that point, but it's worthwhile to revisit it, and maybe we'll call on some of the people that have highlighted points and also suggested interest in joining. And so with that, I'd like to bring the AGM section to this morning to a conclusion, and I need to move to get a proposer to close the meeting, and then a seconder to that motion. Uncle Ridwan proposes, and seconding to close is
Ikram.
Ikram. Okay, perfect. Shukran, everybody, for a productive annual general meeting. And I won't say with certainty, but inshallah next year we're in person at the Sports Science Institute or another venue. And so shukran again to everybody for your patience with all of us this morning. Right, we move on to the special general meeting, which is titled COVID-19 and the Masjid Response. The first point to bring up is the minutes of the special general meeting held on the 13th of September 2020. Quickly, can I get a move to accept those minutes? Those were distributed. And any proposers and seconders, please. I see any hands, any comments in the box. So just as a reminder, that special meeting, Shukran Budajoa is our proposer and our seconder. Uncle Sadiq, Shukran. Okay. We move then to the Masjid response to COVID-19 and the report back, as well as lessons. As you all know, the Masjid is closed. We've, I guess, revisited that over a sustained period now, and communicated that either through the advisories or through the virtual events we've held. Presently, the Masjid is closed because we cannot meet as a function of the government regulations and the fact that we're in a third wave, and the advice that we've sought from public health experts and infectious disease specialists that the third wave that we're presently in will probably mean that the Masjid is closed for at least a further 3 months or longer. As we know, the data changes every day. If we look at Gauteng as the barometer, was the reference point for what's to come in the Western Cape, we still have some significant number of infections in the community to come, and then obviously the attending issues and pressures on the public and private healthcare systems. The the reality then is that regulations will probably remain in place and we'll have to remain closed. Of course, we've maintained closure, and there's been, some talk that we've not been a source of an outbreak, either by gathering in the masjid space or by virtue of people commuting together at the masjid. I don't think that's a source of pride, but more as a pointer that we have a broader responsibility than just opening up the masjid to conduct our regular services. And so, it's not, as I've said before, been without difficulty and pushback, frankly, from certain people, either directly to the imamat or through questioning in the community related to other masajid that are open. So at present, the masjid will remain closed. We will revisit that in light of the evolving nature of infections within the community. That's the short term, and I think the necessary question to anticipate now is what is the medium or long-term strategy with respect to opening. Frankly, we don't know, because at each point we've tried to measure an opening according to how best to do it. And with the masjid space being that small and the number of people to manage a safe opening by the guidelines of the kind of non-pharmaceutical interventions, it also makes it really difficult. And it's good that we raised in the AGM the point of support for existing board members, because frankly, the kind of work that will involve opening will fall on board members who are not in the right age group, frankly, with vulnerabilities. And second, not sufficient in number, because this will require more numbers of people to be involved. So if we can maybe leverage that momentum out of the AGM to establish a subcommittee that could run an opening in the medium or long-term future, I think that'll be a productive post special general meeting conversation and planning. Second point is that we have learned a lot, about what a closure means for the masjid. We've delved into the finance bit, the innovation bit. We've also revisited our sort of solidarity and the acts of solidarity through closing, alongside the community-based activities that are running. And I think those, lessons of how best to do all of this will be ongoing, even though we're 18 months into this. We had a phenomenal experience of hosting our first Eidgah for Eid al-Fitr. And there was a lot of anxiety leading up to it, because we've never done it before. Second, there's all sorts of regulations that govern a gathering, and we took some calculated risks in gathering. And there was long conversations and some disputation around on what to do. But alhamdulillah, it really was delivered with efficiency, with warmth, and in some ways, for most of us, the first time we've seen people in a very, very long time. So there was, despite the distance and the kind of rapid nature of the event, a certain warmth and excitement despite the novelty. So the kind of, I think the feeling out of that was we have to do more Eidgahs, and odd for Claremont, but definitely born out of the kind of need for connection and need for seeing people at these specific events on our calendar. However, in light of the changing community transmission levels of the COVID virus, the Board of Governors has decided to not have an Eidgah for Eid al-Adha. Eid al-Adha is the 20th or 21st of July. It's less than 3 weeks away. The time isn't the issue. It's more the time what will happen in this period from the community infection dynamics. As you know, as you would have read, there is presently no end or no peaking of the third wave in Gauteng, and the Western Cape is nowhere near reaching its peak. It may be that the kind of interventions of restriction and curfews has softened the number of infections, but as of yesterday, there's now almost 3,000, over 3,000 infections daily, and the anticipation with the Delta variant, with increased transmission, with low vaccination rates, it would be irresponsible to have an Idga, even if it is outdoors and it's from a risk perspective lower risk. We're still gathering, and we're still having movement of people, and we don't want to set a precedent as well for the day, which is to gather. And I think, unfortunately, from the Board of Governors, we're going to be risk averse on this, and also stick to the regulations about gathering, which at the moment we can't do. So I'd like to maybe get some feedback on that at this point. I see Rashid has pointed to convening a permanent Idga weather permitting. That's definitely something we should consider. That's quite a new thing. But yeah, let's get some input. Uncle Ridwan?
As far as I understood the level 4 restrictions, all outdoor gatherings are banned. So we can't have the Idga anyway.
Correct.
And also with our last Idga, I did not attend, and I saw from far, and I flew the drone over. And I questioned this. There were a lot of open spaces within the perimeter, and I was told, no, it was families standing together at the back. Even if you're a family, if you go to a masjid, you must still stand apart. So it would be better if families come and just observe those protocols instead of standing together as a family, right? 6 members from the same household think now they can all stand together. That did not happen at our last Idga. Because there was a huge open space, and then right at the back there were families standing together. So we need to observe that for the future. I'm talking about the future now, if we're going to have these things again. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, I think, we struggled. We didn't struggle. We planned for numbers, and I think folk also took their own risk assessment with respect to coming to the event, and that's absolutely fine. That's what we want people to do. And then in terms of the kind of optics of it, yeah, maybe there's ways we can improve. So let's take it from there. There's a few points about extending the Idga with the Eid picnic breakfast. That's fantastic. I see Uncle Ibrahim Bardeen has suggested a virtual Eid Salah program. Okay, let's maybe bucket that into plans going forward. Jamia, do you want to add anything here?
No, it would be nice for Imam Rashid or Imam Shahid to respond to Uncle Ibrahim's question, because that's a question really for Eid al-Adha coming up, because we're not going to have an Idga, that's for sure. We will obviously plan for the transmission of a khutbah, but I think that Uncle Ibrahim is asking whether there would be an Eid Salah program. Maybe Imam Rashid or Imam Shahid can respond to that.
Over to the Imamat.
Yes, we did consider this earlier on in the pandemic. There are a small group of ulama who have in fact said that it's permissible under the current pandemic conditions to actually have and convene virtual salahs if one is in the same city or in the same time zone, right? I will try to forward some of those viewpoints. I've written a small paper on that. And I think in the case of the Eid Salah, it might be easier to do that because it's not a kind of a compulsory prayer, right? So if there's a difference of opinion, it might be easier to navigate that. I also think that what we could do is, of course, we will have to consult, but at the end of the day, we could, if we do come to a position that we would want to do that, then those who feel comfortable with it can do it, and those who are not, fully convinced, they can pray the Eid al-Adha Salah at home. But inshallah, that is something that I will take up, and I will circulate some of the viewpoints. I know that one of the leading figures, international figures who visit South Africa, Sheikh Ninawi. Sheikh Ninawi is one of those who actually advocates this viewpoint. And so I know that some of his followers in South Africa also are advocating this viewpoint. But again, it's a highly contested topic. Shukran for your patience.
Shukran, Imam Rashid. Imam Shahid. Let me try. There we go.
Assalamu alaikum. Yes, I fully support Imam Rashid. The Idgah Salah, to my view, it is a Sunnah Mu'akkada. It's not a Fara'id. And I've read some, notes on the virtual Salah. As Imam Rashid rightly pointed, there are those who approve these type of Salah. And I think that this is a way forward for us as well to maintain, the closeness of our Jama'ah, and to bring also the love and the mahabbah amongst our congregation. So yes, I'm fully in support of this particular step, making the Eid Salah, Eid al-Adha Salah virtual. Yes, I'm in support of it. Shukran.
Shukran, Imam Shahid and Imam Rashid. There's a few comments in support of future Eidgahs as becoming a new normal. There's also a comment from Uncle Shafi Mauza about perhaps the conversation around Eidgahs being premature. So I'd just like to say that the conversation now is not about an Eidgah for Eid al-Adha now. It's at a future date when we're going to be free of the kind of risks of gathering, and I think there's some excitement around it. So we'll kind of entertain the conversation at this point. Jamia, and then Uncle Ridwan.
Shukran, Saleh. I certainly will be supportive of taking the idea of an Eidgah into a normal future. I would say a post-normal future for us to consider. But I want to respond to this question of the virtual Salah. I must say, I think that one of the really positive spin-offs, unanticipated from the pandemic and the closure of the masjid, has been the opportunity that we've taken to empower people through resources. And performing Eid Salah last year for Eid al-Fitr, which was just a few weeks after lockdown started, when we distributed the procedure for performing Eid Salah at home, even Imam Rashid had a generic khutbah that some people requested that he sent around, that I sent around, and so on. And I just think it has been an unanticipated kind of beneficial outcome, that people have been forced into that situation, that they're making the effort to empower themselves. And I think performing Eid Salah is one of those, because they perform other Salahs all the time. this is so I'm not fully supportive of convening a virtual Eid Salah just so that you can again follow an imam, as opposed to making the opportunity for you to do it. What I would like to propose, if it's possible at all, for Imam Rashid or Imam Shahid to do a video, do an educational video. So instead of, last year we sent around the written text, here's how you do it, do a video of it in the masjid and say, here's what you do, blah, blah, blah. And we distribute it before Eid. So it's a resource and people can do it on their own at home. So it's a little bit of a counter proposal to Uncle Ibrahim.
Thanks, Jamia. Uncle Ridwan.
Okay. Am I live? Let me just check.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, I'm actually in support of the virtual Eid Salah. Yes, we all learned, we did it last year and all that. But my point for this one was looking at the technology. We did it via Facebook. I had, when we did in the first lockdown last year, I made Tarawih at home via FaceTime. Now everybody doesn't have FaceTime because you need to have iPhone, right? But that's also a good piece of technology to use for Salah. It's actually better than Facebook. So if we're gonna go to that, we need to find an alternative for FaceTime. Not alternative, but something similar to FaceTime because it works well for Salah. But I like that idea of the virtual Salah with everybody. Yes, we all learned and all that, and but we need to try that as well. I think the other fundis, the younger people, would be able to help us, with that,
Sure.
Whether it's FaceTime or something else that is similar on the other platforms.
Sure.
Okay.
Shukran, Uncle Ridwan. Okay, I don't want to belabor that point around the Eid al-Adha format and the option either for an educational video or a virtual Eid Salah, but perhaps we can leave it to Imam Rashid and Imam Shahid to discuss and then feedback to the board, and we take it from there. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes, it's like a subcommittee, in other words.
Another subcommittee, yeah. Okay. So on this section, there's I guess the point about plans going forward. I mean, the first obvious thing is that we remain enclosed. The second thing is that we'll revisit it. We'll revisit it in line of community transmission dynamics, and this with respect to opening or closure. My anticipation, and this is my opinion based on what we can see right now, is that we won't be open for another 3 months. But as we've done in the past, we'll continue to communicate the decision and obviously factor in all of the variables. But the larger point still remains that in order to open, we're going to need more hands. We're definitely going to need people beyond the board, and I think that's relatively urgent, whether we're opening up in a month or in 3 months. So we'll have to have a subcommittee for that. So I don't want that the subcommittee idea to die in the special general meeting. It has to become live once the meeting ends. And I think let me take that as a responsibility to coordinate. And I'll, yeah, and we'll feedback on how that develops. The other plans going forward, as it relates to COVID-19, I think an important thing, it relates to the budget and the financial aspects of this. So I'm happy at this point to move to the budget for 2021 and ask Auntie Wasila to present that for us, and then we can have a separate conversation about that. Auntie Wasila.
Salam again. I'm just waiting for Jamia to put the slide on. Okay. The 2021 budget is based on the masjid being closed for most of the year. This 2020, did I say 2020, 2021 budget? This 2021 budget was approved by the board in March 2021. This budget is based mainly on an inflationary increase of 3.88% on actuals, with a few exceptions where we do not anticipate the same income or expenses in 2020. We anticipate no fundraising events, so budgets is lower than previous years. The budget income reflects an anticipated income based on past actuals and seeking active sponsors rather than reflecting a guaranteed income. As such, this figure of 941,269 is a target income which we must work towards. We were not sure about raising jihad against poverty income in Ramadan, hence we did not include in the budget. Alhamdulillah, the Ramadan 2021 income of 495,537 far exceeded our expectations, and thus we could spend much more on jihad against poverty in Ramadan. The 2021 budget includes the COVID relief fund of 49,871 Rand, ring fence for emergency relief for CMR members and family. The 2021 budget also includes a figure of 52,000 Rand for caregiving, which is a recent dimension of masjid activities which we hope to sustain in future through more targeted income. The reason the 2021 salary is less than actual is because we have one staff member less. Last year we had Stephen as a caretaker, and then we employed Farida Dihal as a cleaner to assist Stephen 3 days a week. Due to this ongoing closure of the masjid, employing 2 caretakers was unnecessary. We gave Stephen a retention package and employed Farida full-time. Shukran. Okay. CMRM COVID Relief Fund is to provide emergency relief to individual CMR congregants and friends who find themselves in financial stress due to extended COVID-19 lockdown and or loss of significant income from breadwinners. It is intended as once-off emergency relief fund for areas such as medication, doctor consultation, food and personal sanitary products, rent, school fees, house utility bills, burial expenses, etc. The amount of benefit will be discretionary and considered on a case-by-case basis by a subcommittee of the CMRM board. The subcommittee will report to the CMRM board via the treasurer. Anyone is welcome to donate to this fund using CMRM banking details with reference COVID fund. Shukran.
Right. Shukran, Auntie Wasila.
Okay.
Can I open to the floor for conversation around what Auntie Wasila has presented? And I know we had input earlier about the relief fund, so perhaps we can also focus on that. Maybe I should trigger a conversation and ask, do we feel that the relief fund is working? In other words, I mean, have we have we done enough, and could we do more? Yeah, let's maybe get some comments to that.
Salih, if I may comment on that.
Yeah.
I think it's a good point. You know, it was something that we started last year, and I think if Aslam is here, he, you know, if he's still in the meeting, he could comment on this as well. But it was something, for example, as part of the caregiving initiative, care calling initiative last year. That was raised quite early on. The feeling was that at some point, you know, people are going to be suffering loss of livelihoods, especially. So this happened very early on for people in precarious jobs. But it became clear through the year that that was also happening to people in not so precarious jobs anymore. And we recognize that within our community, there may well be people who not and who were not, you know, prior to 2020 in precarious jobs. But everybody and many sectors have been affected by the prolonged lockdowns, etc. And so this was an opportunity to ring fence funds, not part of jihad against poverty, but really as a response to people within our immediate community. And we said that this is not limited to people who are members, but members and extended family. So if it is somebody through the membership that is recommended to us. As you can see from the budget sheet that Wasila presented, the actual expense on that fund in 2020 was 700 Rand. So we disbursed that to one, that was one individual. We did say that we, you know, will have a subcommittee. We had asked or wanted Aslam to be part of that subcommittee, but we've not had that many appeals yet. And part of it is we think there may be reluctance, and I think this is something that Aslam may well speak to. So I'm going to stop there because I see he's handed up.
Would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you very much, Salih. Shukran. I have to admit that the Care Buddies system has gone a bit dormant, or it has been reduced in its activity. And if I were to venture a guess, I would not say that dormancy or that reduction in activity correlates with a lack of need. In fact, there may be that correlation may be going in the other direction. I think it stands to reason that the need in our communities have increased. And I think if we work from that assumption, then even the need within the Claremont Main Road Masjid congregation would also have increased. So I want to posit that assumption, and maybe I can test it amongst you. However, the problem is to identify the need. You see, if we do not have a culture of identifying need for various reasons. People might be shy to come forward. People don't know about the existence of it. We haven't explicitly and categorically made our services known. We don't have a referral system, blah, blah, blah. Then we are not going to be able to identify needs. So I think that we would do well to revisit this particular dynamic and to, given the budgetary constraints that we have here, to find a mechanism to identify need, and then to figure out whether there indeed is a reason for hanging on to this and for extending it and for making it available. Again, the assumption is, just the way things are going now, if you look at the unemployment numbers and so on, that it is quite exponential. The problem in our masjid is that we have to find a mechanism for identification and for disbursement, given the resources that we have. I don't think we can let go of this because this is the new normal. Here people have been talking about the new normal. I think the new normal is going to be unemployment, semi-employment, underemployment, and all kinds of care-related issues that attend to that. That's the first dimension. The second dimension is the dimension of care and care calling and supporting people. Again, here we have reduced our activity because of potentially fatigue and lack of commitment. But I think perhaps we should also revisit those two things. So there are two things: the identification of need and the disbursement of support. And secondly, perhaps again, stepping up on our care buddy, emotion and other core in care systems. Thanks, Salih.
Shukran for that. Can I respond and say that the need is now? So I'm assuming that we're all on the same page that the need is now, and that what will follow is that we need to disperse that money now. It's not the case of waiting for the next 6 months to unfold. We should probably frame it with a deadline. If it's the next 3 months or whatever. And then the third bit would be, there's a lot of sophistication in kind of doing that needs-based assessment. Can we be less discriminate in terms of like who we give to?
Yeah, I think Salih, thanks very much for that endorsement of potentially picking this thing up and giving it greater momentum again. And maybe the Care Buddy community group must meet again and maybe invite a couple of other people to attend if there are people willing to. So thanks for that, Salih. And yes, that is the conversation that we have to have. How to identify, how to generate a sense of availability of it and to kind of disperse it. Yeah.
I think the challenge would be obviously dispersing it sooner rather than later, and then considering the ongoing need to then top up that fund. My basic point is that we should never have money in that account.
Sure.
It should always be coming in and going out as soon as possible. So I think I agree with your point, Aslam. Let's recommence the care system and take it from there.
All right, shukran. So we'll pick it up, inshallah.
Shukran. Right. Any additional points? I know we're coming towards the end of our time together this morning, now afternoon. So are there other comments, perhaps not necessarily just related to the budget or to the relief fund, but more broadly to the COVID-19 and the kind of next steps? Imam Rashid, do you see anything that we should be keeping our sort of eyes on in the next couple of months as relates to the masjid and our activities?
Not really, Salih. The only thing is I am very excited for Nazir Sunday to come on board. So inshallah, on the environmental justice front, I hope that we can see there's a little plug out in Newlands, that will let people know, and we're also supporting the Lesbic River Club development there. So inshallah, the environmental justice is an issue that it's been lagging a little bit, but we're looking forward to it being revitalized. So shukran.
Shukran, Imam Rashid. Buddha Ahmad, sorry to come to you at this point, but I wanted to check with you about, you do a lot of things on a weekly basis with respect to community activities and disbursements. Is there anything from your side that you feel that we can be a bit more supportive of in the coming weeks or months? Let's bring that out into the open or foregrounded.
Yes, few families that's battling these days in different areas. There's one particular family in the Alp area where, except from this Manenberg area, but in the Alp area, are really battling that. That's fine. And I've been to that area quite a few times in Dal. And the people there, they are battling. For instance, one family, there are altogether 7 in the family. None of them are working. They all that. So if there's areas that we need to focus on is sometimes these individual families, right? We know now soup kitchen areas in Manenberg, we get sponsorship from people and they are making places and they're feeding maybe say 600-700 people a week there. Right? So those are the areas, the soup kitchen that they can cope, they can do a lot of things. But it's the individual families that are on the outskirts that are known that are battling now. That's from my side.
Shukran for highlighting that, but Ahmad. I mean, as a follow-up, I mean, do you think it's our role to identify those peripheral families that are not necessarily covered by existing activities? And is that, would you suggest that's something that we take on, or is that out of our scope at this stage?
Sorry, you're breaking up. I didn't get that last bit.
Sorry. My question was, you've highlighted that there's particular families that are vulnerable, and more so than others. Should we be doing something more for those families, or should we be coordinating amongst others to help?
Oh, I didn't get it, Chris. You're breaking up, but I don't know if it's
okay. Well, maybe
but I don't.
Okay, maybe we can revisit that separately. So, any other contributions from the floor before we close? Are there any hands or any comments? Jamia.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to ask before we do formally conclude, to perhaps ask everybody if they can put on the cameras and we can take an AGM screenshot with some waves or whatever, which will be nice before we can formally conclude. Shukran, Saleh.
Shukran, Jamia. As we've learned, it didn't happen if you don't have a selfie. So at least we're doing our AGM selfies then.
And I've got 2 screens, right? So I got to go from one to the other. So you must
give you a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's do, before we do that, I just wanted to thank everybody for their contributions this morning across the AGM as well as the special general meeting. I think there's been some great value to the special general meeting as alongside the AGM, and definitely fresh things for us to consider going forward. I love the suggestions around the subcommittees. I really think that we've got some good momentum coming out of this meeting, especially for the COVID-19 Relief Fund. And I'm particularly happy that that we've had, generous contributions from the floor to make this a lot more of a discussion as opposed to one-way channel of communication, and rather more dry or druk. So I thank you to everybody. As I highlighted there, I'm going to frame this first with a light comment that some of us have lost the hair, others have gained weight in the period of the pandemic. But really just to foreground, the seriousness that is the pandemic, that we need to continue with all these non-pharmaceutical interventions whilst we wait for the rollout of the vaccinations to become a lot more efficient and available and accessible for everybody. I know there's a lot of information out there with regards to vaccinations. If you have questions in your mind, or you received some what you feel is compelling evidence against the vaccination and you're uncertain, there are plenty of people involved in public health and medicine within the Masjid membership community, and we're happy to talk through any concerns or questions. I get questions from people who've had other medical problems, who are worried about taking vaccination, and I'm happy to have that conversation with anybody that has concerns. As you know, vaccinations have opened up to really everybody beyond 50 now, and at least from this next week, it will become a lot more in the public domain that you can access a vaccination if you're over 50. Considering that the board of governors average age is probably 60, 65, I'm happy to report that most of everybody is vaccinating, included the healthcare workers on the group. And I would love for our rates of vaccination to be in the board, to be reflected in our membership community. So yeah, if we can do anything to help usher people along, that it also means that we're closer to returning to some sort of new normal in a post-pandemic era. So shukran to everybody who works so hard in the background. Shukran to the board of governors who've done an extraordinary work over the course of this period, with people on sabbatical, remotely, juggling medical conditions as well as loss. And that point, I'd like to ask Lutfi and Jamia to roll the tribute video to those we have lost and said farewell to in this period. And on closing this general meeting, I'm going to ask Imam Shahid to say a brief dua. And again, gratitude to all of you for all that you do, that's visible as well as invisible to us in the community and in the work that you do daily. Shukran, everybody. Imam Shahid.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal 'asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihat wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr. Rabbana 'alayka tawakkalna wa ilayka anabna wa ilaykal masir. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana وقنا عذاب النار وأدخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار يا رب العالمين. وقال الله تعالى إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم. اللهم افتح لنا بالخير واختم لنا بالخير واجعل أواكب أمورنا بالخير بيدك الخير والعافية إنه على كل شيء قدير. ألا إن أولياء الله لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون الذين آمنوا وكانوا يتقون بفضلك دعواهم فيها سبحانك اللهم وتحية فيها سلام وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
نسألك يا من هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الرحمن الرحيم الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر الخالق البارئ المصور الغفار القهار الوهاب الرزاق السميع البصير الحكم اللطيف الخبير العليم العظيم الغفور الشكور العلي الكبير الحفيظ المقيت الحسيب الجليل الكريم الرقيب المجيب الواسع الحكيم الودود المجيد الباعث الشهيد الحق الوكيل القوي المتين الولي الحميد المحسن المبدع المعيد المحيي المميت الحي القيوم الواجد الماجد الواحد الصمد القادر المقتدر المقدم المؤخر الأول الآخر الظاهر الباطن الوالي المتعالي البار التواب المنتكم العفو رؤوف مالك الملك ذو الجلال والإكرام المقسط الجامع الغني المغني المانع الضار النافع النور الهادي البديع الباقي الوارث الرشيد الصبور الذي ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير اللهم صل أفضل الصلاة على أسعد المخلوقات كسيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم عدد معلوماتك ومداد كلماتك كلما ذكرك ذاكرون وغفل عن ذكره الغافلون.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم اغفر لهم وارحمهم وعافهم واعف عنهم وأكرم نزلهم ووسع مدخلهم واغسلهم بالماء والثلج والبرد ونقهم من الخطايا كما ينقى الثوب الأبيض من الدنس. اللهم لا تحرمنا أجرهم ولا تفتنا بعدهم واغفر لنا ولهم وللمسلمين أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.